Welcome to another episode of Grief Talk. Everything you want to know about grief and more. I'm your host, Vaughn Solis. As an author, mentor, and bereaved mom since 2005, through guest interviews and coaching, here's where you'll always get great content that is inspiring and practical to help you heal after loss. Today's guest is Barb Ashcroft. Barb is an author, mentor, grief illiteracy speaker who loves assisting others by supporting their health, wellness, and lifestyle goals. Her book, When Your Bucket List Springs a Leak, is just a hint of how Barb shares do-overs when travel, health, business, and life don't go as expected. Barb offers her workshop Getting Your Shenanigans in Order and has created a resource guide with tips, tools, and trainings to help eliminate the grief illiteracy that exists today. So welcome to the show, Barb. I have been so eager to have you on the show to share your wisdom and your experience with my audience. So thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you, Ron. I mean, my goodness, it just felt like synchronicity, right? So just really thrilled.
So for the audience, Barb and I did have an introduction through another one of my guests, and she passed me on to somebody else who has been also an important contact. So it just shows you paying it forward and building your professional community should not be underestimated for those who are in the midst of trying to do that, or even your personal connections. It's just fabulous to know you, Barb. So Barb is a wealth of information and experience. And so, Barb, I wanted to get right into this. And as I introduced you in the beginning, you're a mentor, you're a grief illiteracy speaker, which we're going to be touching on a little bit today. You help people from your lifeboat, get back in their own. And we're going to be touching on things that, you do to help people support the bereaved, actually deal with unexpected things that happen in their life. So that's why we're going to be touching on When Your Bucket List Springs a Leak. This is a book that Barb has written, and I totally love the title. But before we get to that, Barb, how about you just explain a little bit about what you used to do in your earlier career and how that sort of transpired into the work you're doing today?
Well, thank you so much. Wow. Goodness. Well, it's kind of a real great month to have this time with you, Vaughn. I'm going to be 75 in just a smidge.
Wow.
And it's so interesting because I don't know whether other people are, but you're more reflective looking back because the time forward is a little less than what the time, looking in the rearview mirror. But looking back on my career, I was very fortunate that natural health found me first. I was suffering from all kinds of health issues. I'll just put them into one big bucket there. And anyways, at age 33, and that was after about 12, 13 surgery, the right people, the right tools, the right supplies, the right everything came together. And I love to learn. I will never stop learning. Mm-hmm. So I started taking all kinds of training and learned from so many wonderful pioneers and became a natural health practitioner doing iridology. Had the blessing to study under Dr. Bernard Jensen. Became a live blood cell microscopist and a certified herbalist and just all those kind of things. But what it was a way of being able to support people with that whole modality. Mm-hmm. So that I would lecture across Western Canada into Washington as well and do consulting for good 3 decades.
Wow.
That I did that. So that was powerful. But what was really sort of more plugged into what I'm morphing to now is I found, you can't do anything as a solitary soul.
Right.
You really need community. And so all of that partnered with personal development. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much. And again, maybe because of my age or whatever, but I was blessed to have personal training from Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, Stephen Covey, just Les Brown, all of these ones that really help shape mindset and how we can get through tough situations. And so that was very key to what I did for, 41 years ago was when I started my natural health practice. So now what I do is I mostly help through education, through my newsletters, etc. I'm not out on the road doing all that consulting anymore.
No.
But I really feel I was blessed with some tools and some talent, was able to package that to help those folks.
That's so wonderful. And, I do want to touch on age just a little bit here. And for those of us that reach that age and we can sort of feel we have a little bit more time to digest all we've learned and put it into different types of practices for ourselves as workers, how we're going to go about our work and share, because we don't want to have all this knowledge and experience go to waste. And so I really appreciate you sharing your age and still offering the wealth of experience you have for people, maybe just in a little bit of a different way. So I want to turn to your work when your bucket list springs a leak. I absolutely love that. I took a quick look at it, and I'm going to have a link for that in the description for anybody that wants to take a read. I love your description about it. What are some of your key lessons in that book, and why did you write it? It
was ruminating for a lot of years. That I had team members with my natural health business that kept saying, "How do you stay in this with all the emotional ups and downs and the marketplace and this and that, the other thing?" And, I'm really a hope evangelist is what I am,
Yes.
Because I was blessed with a dad that really helped form me with what's the nicest thing that's happened to you today. We couldn't have dinner without answering that question. So that was all good, but I knew that I'd been learning lots with my decades of career and being a student of, personal development, law of attraction and allowing and all of that. And so we had planned the bucket list trip, right? And so my husband and I were on this trip, the New Zealand and Australia. It was going to be my Thornbirds trip. Do you remember the book?
I do.
So, we were going to that area of the world. We were going to be on an island where, it was going to be the, whatever. Well, about 5 days before the trip started, some little calamities started piling up. And so the book is actually 12 life lessons that each chapter is devoted to one more speed bump on the road of life and travel and health and business that doesn't go the way you think it's going to go. And it was kind of goofy because it was by day 8 or day 10, I finally clued into, this trip is all about, up-leveling. I'm having to put all that I've learned into practice from all kinds of craziness that happened on this trip. And so you learn about the crazies that go, all the mishaps that go on. But mostly what you learn is, okay, what's the pivot? What is the lesson that you can put into place? Here we are on the Tasman Sea and being just tossed all over the place. And it was scary and it was really bad weather. And learning some of, I've already learned and taught with doing masterminds for law of attraction. So I already knew that, but I had to apply it myself. So, it was very interesting to do it that way. But that's what the book is, 12 lessons, life lessons on how you get through. What are your undos? What are your do-overs? What are your mulligans? But all those things, when they don't work, what do you do to get through to the other side?
Yeah. So great. I'm actually going to be buying your book, Barb. I just saw it this morning and I read the description and I thought that this is probably timeless information because different things happen to us. I'm sure you're going to agree at every stage of life. So what we're going through in our 20s, even our teens, but 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and obviously your 70s, hopefully we get our toolbox filled so that we just know which tool to grab when something confronts us. So in a way, it doesn't have anything to do with age. And people say that, Barb. I'm sure you've heard that. People go, oh, it has nothing to do with age. But I'm going to beg to differ because you do reflect differently and you wouldn't maybe make the same decisions and choices that you made in your 30s and 40s and maybe even your 50s. So age gives us grace. It gives us distance and grace and a different way to decide how we want to live.
I had my 40 days in the desert. This is what I choose, grace over grind. And that's not my book, but it's, I just love it because it says how grace will take your business where grinding can't. And I was a very productive individual with my career. I mean, I was, in those days, I had the philosophy of, if it is to be, it's up to me. I don't know who coined that, but as you age, or at least as you realize how limiting some of the body is, you really sharpen your BS meter.
Okay, I love that. Sharpen your BS meter. I'm writing that down. Yep.
So your antenna gets very fine-tuned as to, no, I'm not going there. No, I'm just putting that person in a pink bubble. And no, I'm not allowing any of that in.
Yeah.
Because you just realize that self-care is really key to being able to, create a life that you really want to be in the middle of, So that's where the book was perfect at the time, but also then we went into COVID. And then a lot of people had a lot of loss. They had they had to renew. They needed to pivot as to, well, what do I do now? And so much loss with all kinds of PTSD kind of depression, and then all the things that happen with losing businesses, losing a pet, losing a loved one. I mean, just on and on and on, all kinds of things. So of course, the book, I believe, is timeless because it's life skills. And we all need to have a good dose of bounce back ability.
Yeah. You said something also really important. I just want to touch on it for a brief moment because in this very competitive world that I never noticed, I mean, sure, we all know it's competitive, but I never really noticed how competitive it was until I started to go, you know what, I need to be a little bit more visible. I'm going to start my podcast, which I thought about for 2 years before I started it. So I was learning different things from different business leaders, some of them quite successful in offering communities to join in courses and so on and so forth. And, there were a lot of times I felt like I'd have to kick myself to the sideline because I just couldn't change as rapidly as tools and trends were changing and just all of this stuff. I'm very grateful that more recently, as a couple of the business leaders I sort of work with are starting to understand in their younger years, I might add, late 30s, 40-ish, about authenticity and bringing this authenticity piece to running business and going against the grind, And so I love that piece that you brought in about our bodies. So we can have the youngest mind ever, but then, and this isn't age related, but, if the body, the mental state, your emotional state is not allowing you to function at a pace that you normally would today if you could, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. You need to pay attention to that. And it doesn't mean you are never going to succeed. Doesn't mean you're a failure. Just means you have to find your way around the same thing a little bit differently and, make your mark. And if you aren't struck by anything serious, health or whatever, still the body's getting older, stuff happens,
Well, you realize that if you're wanting to redeem the time and actually do the things you want to do, not that the other stuff that you have to do, it takes pivoting. It takes, really strategies to be able to come out with what is working for you.
What tools are necessary for us to draw on when we're strategizing things for our life?
I've led workshops on, finding your purpose, finding renewed purpose, but I always focus on what are your top 4 fulfillment needs. Because when you know what your top 4 fulfillment needs are, and you access them, then you feel you're in the zone as you are so full of joy because that's all being met. Mm-hmm. And we actually take people on, we call the game, it's a game called Survivor, which was coined by Michael Loge of the Law of Attraction.
Yeah.
But you take your 30 fulfillment needs, and with this process of the workshop, you drill it down to what 4 are surviving that are your top 4 fulfillment needs. And so I know for me, right now, you're fulfilling 2 of those because one is connection and one is community. Mm-hmm. And then another aspect for me is accomplishment. I'm the kind of person that I want to be able to check off that little box that says I did that. And so my 4th one is fairness. And if you're ever in a networking meeting with me, when I'm been given the timer, I will be interrupting you and saying, that's great. If you could just hold that to the end, everybody needs to have a turn. Mm-hmm. Because it's just really the way I'm created, right? Mm-hmm. So anyways, when those 4 fulfillment needs are being met all in one day, that is an incredible day. Yes. When they're not being met, that's a real crappy day. And what I learned through this was there's stuff that we don't necessarily want to do, but we have to do it. So I'll give you the biggest example of that as a strategy. So even though I've been in natural health since 1979, mm-hmm. I am not drawn to exercise. I know we're made of atoms. We have to move them. I mean, that's key, Yeah. But I would I'm a thinker, I'm a planner, I'm a dreamer, I'm a writer. And so give me, a blankie, a hot cocoa, and a soft place. And, that's where I float. But I know I need to, and I have to. Yeah. So what I did as a strategy was I signed up for a ladies' fitness class, which I attended, but I never went there for the exercise. I knew I was going to get my community fulfilled. I was going to get my connection fulfilled. I was going to get my accomplishment fulfilled. Mm-hmm. So that was the strategy of just having a different lens to look through to say, and then of course I exercised. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't what the end all was for me initially. That's how I got around my my wanting to just, oh no, I'll get around to it, I'll get around to it. No, it was a case of, okay, well, here's a strategy that you can do to do that. So I love working with strategies with folks to help them find, okay, what can we do to get around that speed bump? How do we get over the mountain or around the mountain, or what is it that, and because you know that it's necessary.
I just have a quick question. With these top 4 fulfillment needs of yours, now, do you apply those as well to your personal relationships, like family, to every area of your life, and just see those fulfillment needs as being fulfilled differently? Or can you have other top 4 fulfillment needs depending what area of life we're addressing?
Definitely, I feel those top 4 fulfillment needs are basically static. They're there. And so, but what we do work with people in this regard is, you've probably seen it in the past. It's called a life pie. So what we've done is we would take a particular piece of the pie, let's say it's relationships, and we would work on that for a period of time, a month to a quarter of the year, and say, okay, how can we get our fulfillment needs met? What strategies can we have? Let's say it's family. Okay, and we have family that doesn't live close. So what are we going to do to have that connection, have that community? What are we going to have to choose to set aside to make sure that we accommodate that within this time frame? So, and then just go through the pieces of the pie of all the different things, whether it's, whatever it is that you're looking at, health, wellness, whether you're looking at finance, whatever piece of the pie, and work on it, that, one at a time.
For the audience, I think that's really great about thinking if we can leave you with one thing, hopefully more, but one thing in terms of strategizing. I love, Barb, your idea of think about your top 4 fulfillment needs as something static, and then I'm going to do that as well. And it does help, it does help with the feeling of success probably all around.
Can I just add one more piece?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, please do.
Because I think this will add some clarification for folks that have never heard this before, in that a lot of times your top fulfillment needs, sometimes people say, well, what's your calling? What's your, what is it? And people say, oh, well, my calling is that I'm supposed to teach. Or my calling is that I'm an artist. But they miss the big part of that isn't accurate. Yes, they might be drawn to teaching, but they're drawn to teaching for the joy that they get from making a difference. The artist being creative, those are all fulfillment needs. You see, what we've done is we've distilled it down into an actual, not a job description, but what is it that you gain? And so the whole thing about finding renewed purpose is the end result is joy. And with everybody going through so much loss, that's a key way of being able for people to get out of paralysis back into finding joy again, even though it's tough. But that way, with the 4 fulfillment needs, you can then, maneuver and coach and strategize to be able to say, oh, okay, if I get that met, then I'm on the right path. I'm working towards joy, because that's the goal, not being a teacher. That isn't the goal, to be a teacher. The goal is what you get out of teaching.
Yeah. I think the reason I'm not stumped, but why I'm thinking a little about this is because we don't think very much or talk very much about self-fulfillment and go, what really fulfills me? We have to stop and think about that a little bit, because I think we are so programmed, and for many decades now, which is why I want to move into this next segment with you and talk a little bit about happiness. We're so programmed to achieve the outcome. We don't really spend a lot of time on the steps to get there. Other than, I remember very well from the 80s and even into the 90s, the vision board, the create your vision, you think it, you can have it, et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't until, I had my own trauma in 2005, I had to toss everything I'd learned, 80s, 90s, so for the past, 20 years, actually 23 years, and go, no, this doesn't work when your life has fallen apart. Is there anybody out there that's going to tell me what to do when your life is completely and utterly fallen apart and you don't know who you are? My work was born from that. And 18 years later, it's taken me 18 years of, just like you went on your journey, of self-discovery and putting all the pieces together and presenting it now to the world in a bit of a package. However, I will always be learning. We will always, like you said earlier, you're a lifelong learner. Me too. And so learning these different terms, I'm going to throw out there just because I have to give a nod to this. I had an interview with a young person. So we were talking about happiness, which I'm going to move into. And she said to me, she works with a doctor and she works in functional medicine. So they kind of bring a little bit east-west together. And she said, well, happiness is just a byproduct. So we got into a little bit of a conversation about, you really can't chase happiness as the outcome because we can't sustain happiness. It's an emotion. You can't sustain it. And so I said to her, okay, I've sort of been raised from the 80s, 90s, that's what you did. You wanted, you went after happiness. This is my experience, my sort of interpretation of it, and how, and I've been battling for some time now, years, about how to stay happy. So when she told me, and this resonated with me, if it doesn't resonate, the information with you, I'm not here to try and change anyone's mind, but I'm as well as being a very spiritual, creative person, I also love the science behind stuff. And I love the fact that thinking, okay, I feel better understanding I can't sustain happiness, so I need to change my goal. So we got into a little conversation about, okay, so what's the end goal? What's the outcome? So for her, it was presence. For me, it was balance. And I went, I love putting the two together. And that's the byproduct is going to be the happiness, the joy, and the contentment, and many other things. So I just wanted to throw that in for us to think about just a little bit, because I have to be untrained in some of the thinking that was instilled in me 40 odd years ago, and go, okay, maybe this isn't maybe I could expand on my consciousness a little bit today, and see how that fits with what I'm personally trying to achieve in my life. For me, it's all about balance and feeling at peace and contentment. And I don't have anything that's going to rock my world today. But this is where your work is so important, because we all know that your world could get rocked even by a teeny tiny thing, because that's life. So that's life. Things don't always go our way, and things happen for other people that we're close to. And I don't want to be reactionary. I always want to be responsive. And solutions, a solution-oriented approach I have discovered over the last several years, this is what allows us to be responsive. And I just want to say for my audience who might be struggling with a very difficult loss right now, or in grief or in trauma or anything like that, the sooner that you can understand there's a solution for everything. It might take a while to get to it, and you might have to let go of something in exchange for the solution you're looking for, but it is possible. And I really, really wish one of the major things, there's two major things I would have wished in my early grief, but that's one I would have wanted. Going back to the toughest years of my grief is just to trust there was a solution for everything, instead of panicking and thinking I had to put out every single fire by myself, which came from the trauma. So, Barb, I didn't want to talk about that specifically today, but what I unless you did want to offer something on that piece that I just said. I just always like to put a little nod to people who are struggling and, go, I don't have time to think about fulfillment. I'm busy putting out fires in my life and my life's crappy. And, I just lost my child, or I just lost my spouse, or you know what I mean? And we're not thinking about fulfillment in those situations.
Well, I go back to what I was called as a handle, as a hope evangelist.
Yes.
I think often we have to think in almost slogans, not even a whole paragraph. We have to think in short snippets, because that's the only thing that's going to sit and land. And one thing that I experienced myself with loss was today is just a snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a snapshot. It's not the whole picture. I'm not going to throw out everything just because today is super crappy. And it's just a snapshot.
I love that. So today is just a snapshot. Tomorrow you can create a new picture, or even a beginning of one. Anyway, what I don't want the audience here to let go of is hope. And it is extremely difficult. This episode is not about that. I will do one, I promise, on an upcoming episode on hope and the struggles with that, because it is essential, from my experience through 18 years of being bereaved as a mother, it is essential to find a snippet of hope in just something that you can hang on to. For me, it was a little pinprick of light because of an opportunity that was upcoming for me. And then there was a bigger one, and then a bigger one, and then a bigger one. And I hung on to it through all the crappy stuff that was going on in my personal life at the time, or that I perceived as really crappy, but looking back, it really wasn't. Anyway, but I want to actually move on a little bit here, Barb. And thank you for sharing, today is a snapshot. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit, though, about happiness. I know you're a hope evangelist. I'm just curious, what I just said a few minutes ago about happiness as a byproduct, does that resonate at all with you? Or is your position that we can sustain happiness and we go for happiness as the outcome? You were speaking earlier about joy, as we can experience joy when we have our fulfillments met. Do you think people are chasing something? And if they are chasing something, what are they chasing?
It's a very big topic. But I believe that we all want happiness.
Yeah.
And life is a real, Heinz 57 kind of experience. You got everything going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What I think is even more important to me is the people I've met and the experts that I've interviewed on my Compassion in Action interview series.
Mm-hmm.
The whole aspect of that comes true to me is nobody makes it on their own.
Yeah.
It's all about, we need people around us. We need mentors. We need people that give totally of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to have those truth speakers into our life that help us, because we're also like a pendulum. We can swing this way and swing that way.
Yeah.
So we need people to pull us back and say, hey, what about, this? For me, it's my spouse. It's like, really? That wasn't very nice. Or whatever. You've got those people in your life. But I think community is even mostly important for people who are in grief with whatever the loss is. Mm-hmm. That they need to have community around them and to be able to not have to rely on themselves to put out all the fires.
I agree with you about community. So ultimately, I think we want to feel safe.
That's a fulfillment need. So again, we're all a rule of one. We're all an experiment of one. So
Yeah.
everybody's going to be different with what fulfillment needs or categories they feel is key to them.
Yeah, well, this is coming from people who work as experts in neuroscience and brain stuff, and that the brain is wired for us to feel safe. I'll just put it biologically for a second. So in order to feel safe, we're going after different things. But by and large, I agree with you. I think we want to feel happy, that we identify perhaps and interpret happiness as our safety. Because if everything is going well in our life, we don't have struggles, or if we do, we know we can manage them. We don't have financial worries. You know, we've got that soft place to fall. We have a warm bed to sleep in, our food to fill our tummies, enough to pay the bills, etc., etc. Hey, I'm happy. So the semantics maybe will change for different people. And I think that we feel a greater sense of relief and safety in numbers, which is your community. And actually, I believe that a good part of our healing comes from our shared stories. I absolutely 100% believe that, and we just need more people talking.
Especially, you know, that's the whole thing when you had asked about grief illiteracy and
Yes.
how this all evolved for me was I had 4 friends become widows in a matter of weeks. And these were all special people that I cared about. And I was totally grief illiterate, meaning I wanted to support them. I wanted to, you know, be able to be all that they needed, but I was frozen. And so being that I've loved learning, somebody knows. So having 4 at once like that really threw me into, for my own self, I have to learn what to say, what to do, rather than freeze and do nothing and just feel the guilt of not being the support that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So that's how that all got started. And it evolved into compassion and action. And what's interesting about that one is it's actually geared for the community or the people surrounding the bereaved. Because when we don't know what to say, when we don't know what to do, we do nothing. Yeah. And then we feel the guilt, and the poor bereaved is feeling that they've been ostracized or de-enfranchised or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole focus of that. And so I was actually in a mastermind at the time as a student. And the coach on this one particular session she said, okay, what are your friends or your ideal clients? What's keeping them awake at night? Well, I broke into the ugly cry because I could imagine myself with, you know, all the questions that are going around in their head. And so based on that, I started interviewing on Zoom experts that were sitting across from grieving individual, saying, what about this? What about finances? What about all the legal mumbo jumbo? What about where spiritually, what does this mean? And so anyways, now we're approaching 2 years into that. And it's my passion project. I doubt if I'll ever stop doing it, but it really, I was so pleased with how it was helping build confidence. So the people surrounding family, friends who are going through a loss will step into it. Well, you know, they'll be there. They'll be able to assist in a bigger way, and because it is a sacred space, you know, to be able to do that. So that was really key with all of that. And so that's what my newsletters are all about.
Yeah. So I just want to say, so I did see on your website, you could sign up for your newsletter on your website. I also see that you have quite a healthy Facebook group going. And is your Facebook group related to Compassion in Action?
Well, I've got several Facebook groups, but more than the best exposure for that is on LinkedIn.
So if someone visits your website, we'll have all the links to your socials and your website. And we're going to get to that in a minute, but I just want to throw this in now. So if somebody visits your website, they have an opportunity to join your Facebook group from there, read about Compassion in Action, and then get further information about how they can get involved. Are you doing Zoom calls? I just want to ask, are you doing Zoom calls still with regard to Compassion in Action, like on a regular basis?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm interviewing people all the time.
Okay.
On Zoom, and those interviews go into my newsletter. That's what my newsletter is. As they're monthly, there's a new interview, whether it's end of life doula or could be anything and any. I've got amazing interviews on there, and so that's how that sort of comes together. So another thing people can do to save time and effort, they can certainly just contact me from the contact information, and I'll be happy to direct them. And there's a lot of different places you can go, but if you want the full meal deal, you go here. If you want a snippet, you go, so.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Barb, for the work that you're doing in that, because I know when you and I first met and we had a little chat on Zoom, and you were telling me about that experience with your friends becoming widowed and you starting this grief literacy work. It's so important because it's not really work like that I feel I could take on, because I'm not in the role really of struggling to support someone bereaved, but I certainly did lose pretty well everyone in my life. And yeah, that was really hard to go through. But having said that, I do just want to say I understand why people leave us, especially the harder the loss. I really do understand that, but grief literacy is so necessary. So thank you for the part that you're playing in bringing this awareness to people, because they don't know what to say or do. And often we don't need very much from you people. We just need you to know that we're not going to give you anything like really bad or catchy, especially those of us that have lost a child. I did want to actually move a little bit to your workshop, Getting Your Shenanigans in Order. I just love that. You have the coolest names of things, Barb. You really do. So what is that, Getting Your Shenanigans in Order? And who is that workshop basically designed for?
As I was interviewing experts and grieving individuals with my newsletter, there was a whole PS that came up, and that was related to the chaos or the mess that was left when they lost someone. And so I thought, oh my goodness, because I'm an organizer, and I've been a hub for decades with knowing who does what, how, and who to refer, For me, the Getting Your Shenanigans in Order was a basically paying it forward with love. And so it's a workshop on putting together your binder. And I learned from all of these individuals so many key things, like, who has a key to your home? How do they get passwords? What about where's your medical number? Or all of these things. So what I've done is I created a workshop. It's called Taking Action. Peace of mind comes after you take action. And so what it is, it's personal instructions on putting together your own binder. And I've created videos on exactly what needs to be done. Yeah. And I also had special forms that you would fill, like here's a sheet on what to give to the paramedics. that has everything on there. Your go-to list. Who's your notification? Who, if something happened to your husband on the way home, who's going to stand beside you? Who's going to help you when all the blood's drained from the brain and you've got to figure out, okay, what? And who has a key? Wow. What family and friends need to be contacted? Yeah. And then I have a 16-page government. It's called After a Death Checklist. And it has all the government numbers. It has also checklists about, okay. And so what we do is I have a paint by number workbook that's on my website. So they can just go through and do all of these. But it's so amazing. Like we found out so many things that, for instance, one of my 4 ladies had their car in both names, but she had to prove that she was actually married to him because with her marriage certificate, well, who on earth, anyways, so many little things that can be stumbling blocks. And so for me, this was a way of putting it together. I have 2 go-to people. They both know where my binder is. They both have all the legal documents of how to access that. Mm-hmm. And even on the front of my binder, it even has 911 in case and my address and how to get there.
Is this a resource that people can download from your website, or is it part of the workshop, or how does that work?
Well, what they would do is they would purchase the workbook and then they download it there.
Okay, so Barb, that's fantastic. Personally, we've already pretty well done all of that in our family, but I have talked to financial experts, I have talked to insurance experts, and everybody agrees that there is still illiteracy around pre-planning for emergencies, estate stuff, wills, and really what you're covering here, just what to do. Because when you're traumatized by something sudden, you could even forget the 911 number. And I lost my mother super suddenly 5 years after my daughter. So I got the call. My husband was overseas and
oh my goodness,
my son was 18, and so I mean, you're dealing with stuff, and then I'm thinking, well, how am I supposed to go to work tomorrow, and and all these things, and then you got to call all the relatives. And I can tell you also, when you just mentioned things like passwords to your accounts, having a power of attorney is the best thing you could do, in my opinion, if you're going to be responsible for someone's medical, or at least be named in a will as the executor. So just to access bank accounts and stuff, because, you can't access a family member's bank accounts unless you're named as executor, or you have agreement from all the other family members who could have a say in it, and it can get nasty and awful even when there's no basic money. And just think about that. And in my mom's case, we were so lucky because my mom told me exactly what to do in the event of her death, because she was in the hospital a month before she died. And I was like, you're not going to die, Mom. You're not going to die, Mom. Right. And of course she did die at home, but 4 weeks later. But I knew exactly what to do, how to pay for the funeral and all of that stuff, because it's thousands of dollars, folks. If you haven't had any experience, average today, people have been telling me it's probably running up to $10,000 just for a basic funeral services, because back in the day, even at my mom's time of death and my daughter's 5 years apart, we're running $4,000 or $5,000 at that time. That is not even a memorial. So people don't think about this stuff, and we're not taught about it.
No, exactly. I just want to share an important point is that when I was doing all of this and I felt, oh my goodness, it doesn't need to be this way. People could have this binder done and it would be the peace of mind. But I was doing so much work around it and doing workshops and all of this that my husband says, you know something that I don't know about him, No, I said, here's the important point, this is our love for our kids. So they will be able to grieve without the chaos.
It's so important, Barb. And so I'm glad we're talking today about all these things. And this is the nuts and bolts of life. You know, it's either you are going to die and leave someone struggling with stuff if you haven't talked about it, or you're going to be the one left cleaning up the mess. And I can tell you for a fact, whoever your loved one is that passes and you're stuck cleaning everything up, and if they're renting a place, you know, you have only a very finite time before they want you out of there and, you know, and get the place re-rented. And if they have a mortgage, there might be all kinds of stuff that have to be taken care of. Like there's all sorts of stuff. So at minimum, it becomes really vital that you talk amongst yourselves in your immediate family and to some degree an extended family where necessary, and agree to who wants to take on role of executor, where the wills are, you know, who's getting what. Do you want this? You know, do you want my car? And, you know, like, because it becomes very burdensome in and amongst the sometimes trauma, and any sudden loss, quite frankly, is trauma inducing. But let's just even keep it to a loss of a parent that you're kind of expecting, but you know, it's really hard. And then having to dispose of all of their stuff and memories. I did it, had to do it. And trust me, what's important to your loved one and it's not important to you. If you want to have a conversation about how guilty you feel when you have to throw stuff in the garbage or recycling or give to Value Village or this, that, and the other that you know maybe were treasures of your loved one, yeah, it can produce tons of guilt and heartache and whatever. So just talking about it, hey, if anything ever happened to you, what do you want? You know, do you want to be buried? Do you want a cremation? Where do you want it? What kind of service do you want? Because we can't read each other's minds. And people really, I'm sure you know this, people really struggle with how to lay their loved one to rest, even if they've never, ever talked about it.
Yeah, and that's the key thing is, again, where the whole premise of all of this is that it doesn't have to be that way, because you can do this as an act of love for your family.
Yeah.
Put it together, and that is a paint by number workbook. Basically, you can go through it. You can even do a page a day.
Yeah.
And you'll be done. I mean,
Yeah.
And so anybody who purchases the workbook, they automatically get invited to my private Compassion in Action Facebook group, where I do go live and go through different pages at different times so they can pause me. You know, we've got any questions about this? We're growing a community there, but it's basically for people that have already taken the first step. There's lots of hand holding. You don't have to do this on your own, but the key thing is reach out and get started.
Barb, this has been awesome. Do you have any key takeaways for the audience before we just wind up with your resources?
Well, I think I just have a one-liner.
Okay. I love your one-liners.
You gotta wanna, WANNA, because absolutely people can help support you.
Yeah.
They can be around you. They can fan the flame of that little tiny light, but you've got to light it yourself. You've got to want to progress. You've got to want to take action. You've got to want to, you know, have a better, more fulfilled life. You've got to want to, because nobody can do your sit-ups for you. You know, I wish they would, but.
You know what I did about that, though? And I know you said back a while ago that, you know, you're not really drawn to exercise very much. Well, me either. As you were talking about everything and cozying up with your hot chocolate and stuff, and I'm like, Barb and I are kindred spirits there, you know. But hey, it is good for us. And so I've gone through different periods in my life where I've done different levels, never high intensity, but aquasize and I don't know, this and that. And more recently, a few months ago, I was starting to feel sluggish. And so I went, okay. So anyway, I started to get out my yoga mat, right? And start with some, exercises, very minor exercises, but enough to move parts of my body, my legs and so on, that I could handle. And then more recently, about a month ago, I went, you know what? It might be more fun if I follow some freebie YouTube workouts. Just 5 minutes, 7 minutes. So that's what I've been doing. So I feel like I'm part of a community with the instructor, even though I don't pay for it and it's not live. And I go at my own pace. And I've built up stamina for it, and I like it because I'm viewing it as a gift to myself in the days that I'm doing it, which is usually 5 to 6 a week. So it's just the willingness to start something, anything. Hey, Barb?
Yeah, you gotta wanna.
So, Barb, we're at the top of the hour, and it has been my absolute pleasure to have you here. I just want to say that people can find you at barbashcroft.ca/workshops. I'll have the link below to anything else, but you can pretty well find anything that Barb has talked about today and her offers on that website. Again, barbashcroft.ca/workshops, and your wealth of information. So thank you, Barb, for being on my show. It was just great to have you, and I'm so glad that we're connected.
Thank you so much, Bon. It was a treat.
Absolutely. Take care.